From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following.
The West Virginia High Technology Consortium Foundation, diversifying West Virginia's economy through technological innovation and development at the Fairmont I-79 Technology Park, now with locations in downtown Wheeling, Moundsville, and Glenville.
Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, known as MAPS, presented its budget to the Senate Finance Committee this morning, but the discussion turned to prison overcrowding. We'll have that story. And we'll meet Patrick Morrisey. He took over the office of Attorney General just over a month ago. This is the Legislature Today. And good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. A string of mass shootings making national headlines in the past year has prompted attention to gun control from the federal government, and it should be of no surprise that proposed gun laws would trickle down to the state level. Dave Mistich takes a look at two gun-related bills currently making their way through the process in the House of Delegates.
House Bill 2471, which would allow for the lawful possession of firearms or ammunition during a declared state of emergency, was read for a second time today. Delegate Tim Miley of Harrison County explains the bill.
Obviously, there's a heightened sensitivity to the Second Amendment and gun ownership rights now in light of the plan or attempt to maybe impose some sort of gun control at the federal level. So because of that fear, founded or not, we have been seeing a lot of gun bills introduced in the legislature. The Speaker introduced this bill himself, of which I was a co-sponsor, and he just felt that it was a bill that we needed to clear some things up because there was some ambiguity. And if someone does unlawfully take your firearms or your ammunition during a state of emergency, when you might need it the most, that there's a private cause of action to get that ammunition or those guns back. Or if you can't get them back, then certainly recover the costs of them. So it's a cleanup bill and a clarification bill.
Also related to guns was House Bill 2580, which was introduced today by Delegates Folk, Nelson, and others. That bill seeks to deem future federal, state, and local legislation concerning firearms as invalid or unenforceable. Delegate Michael Folk of Berkeley County is the lead sponsor on the bill.
This is not something that we're making waves on. Obviously, there's been 6 or 8 or up to 10 states that have proposed, and many of them have passed a very similar, if not almost word-for-word law. So it's not like we're the first. We're not treading on new territory here. So it's just a matter that we're doing what we think is right.
While Delegate Miley said he's concerned with Second Amendment rights, he admitted he was worried with the potential implications of the bill introduced by Folk and other members of the House GOP.
At some point, we can go too far in trying to protect our Second Amendment rights. I think their bill posed some real risks of having law enforcement officers, DEA officers, sheriff's deputies, other law enforcement officers who might be trying to exercise their law enforcement duties, and then all of a sudden, they're charged with a crime for trying to do so. And their bill has far-reaching impact, far beyond what I think it should go. The NRA is not even supportive of it. And so that should tell you some things about the far-reaching impact of that bill.
The GOP-led House Bill 2580 was referred to the Judiciary Committee, while Miley's House Bill 2471 will go to vote on tomorrow's floor session. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
The Senate Finance Committee is a little more than a week into scheduled budget hearings from state agencies detailing their proposed financial plans and priorities for fiscal year 2014. Today, the committee heard from the Division of Corrections, which is having to balance budget cuts with an overcrowded system. Ashton Mara reports.
The State Division of Corrections Commissioner Jim Rubenstein presented his budget proposal to the Senate Finance Committee this morning, telling senators he was able to cut more than $50,000 from their central office operations alone. Rubenstein offered a more than $180 million total budget, but when the committee began with questions, focus quickly turned from the finances to the issues. Senator William Laird of Fayette County began.
How important from your perspective is the immediacy and urgency of the need for the legislature to address this issue this current session?
Senator, I've said for over the last year, and I don't say it lightly or as a scare tactic, but we are at a crisis situation with the prison population.
Prison overcrowding was set as a top priority by Governor Earl Ray Tomblin during his State of the State address last week. Rubenstein says his department is working to curb the numbers by adding 350 beds this year and enhancing community support programs. But those projects all come down to funding that must come from the legislature. However, Senate Finance Committee Chair Senator Roman Prezioso of Marion County says funding is the issue. Because of a more than $140 million growth in the amount the state must commit to Medicaid this year, the legislature will have to take the money from other areas. Tomblin tried to find solutions to that problem. Governor Tomblin asked multiple state agencies to cut 7.5% of their budget this year. But now it's the Senate Finance Committee's responsibility to make those cuts work in their full budget proposal. Prezioso says 65% of the state's more than $4 billion budget is protected by state law, meaning neither the governor nor the legislature can reduce those funds without a change to state code. That's why during each session, the committee hears presentations from the heads of state agencies, detailing their budget proposals and priorities for the next fiscal year. Those presentations began last week and will continue through mid-March, but this year, 35% of those proposals will have to account for the cuts.
On a daily basis, the Finance Committee brings in individuals to present a budget. We take into consideration their opinions. We look very strongly at what programs they want to cut. And also there has to be some programs that maybe need additional dollars. So there's a cost shift within agencies.
Prezioso says Medicaid, the state police, and K-12 education, for example, were exempt from the governor's reductions, making other agencies feel the cuts more deeply.
So that's why a lot of these agencies are taking more severe cuts than others. We're protecting the Promise Scholarship. We're protecting our grant programs. That's a portion of higher education. So subsequently, there's a shift to the institutions that have to take more of the cut as opposed to taking a 7.5% cut across the board.
Prezioso says when it comes to overcrowding, the state does not have the $200 million it would take to build a new prison, and won't anytime in the near future. He says the state's money may be better spent in community-based programs that prevent inmate numbers from continuing to grow. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
Next, we'll meet the state's new Attorney General. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 337 to establish a statewide system for sexual assault forensic examination services. The bill creates a state commission and local boards that are authorized to establish an examination plan for sexual assault victims. The bill provides timely examinations and other services to assist victims with support and effective evidence collection. This bill was recommended for passage by the Joint Judiciary Committee. Senate Bill 338 to codify existing common law in West Virginia as it relates to what possessors of property owe trespassers. Senate Bill 339 requiring that for fiscal year 2014 a sum of $3,409,525 be deposited into the Education Improvement Fund for appropriation by the legislature to provide tuition and fee awards for promised scholars at public institutions. Senate Bill 340 to allow epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, auto-injectors, be maintained in schools for emergency treatment during anaphylactic reactions. Senate Bill 341 requires livestock to be enclosed by a fence. The bill requires adjoining landowners to pay for a just proportion of partition fences. Senate Bill 343, Governor Tomlin's bill to authorize the creation of a public nonprofit corporation to, along with state government, collectively address several environmental and economic development programs. The corporation would promote the productive reuse of idled and underutilized commercial, industrial, and mining properties, to support more efficient use of existing public infrastructure, encourage increased job creation with living wages, renewed community vitality, and tax revenue generation while protecting public health and natural resources. And Senate Bill 343 to dedicate 3% of oil and gas severance tax revenues up to $20 million annually to the oil and gas producing counties of origin and their respective municipalities. On second reading in the Senate tomorrow, the amendment stage, Senate Bill 71 regarding descriptions of right-of-ways and easements, and Senate Bill 145 to correct a code reference in order to conform the language to the federal Help America Vote Act as to election complaint procedures. Pursuant to the West Virginia Constitution, the Attorney General is the Chief Legal Officer for the state of West Virginia. Patrick Morrisey was elected as the Attorney General on November 6, 2012, and was sworn into the office on January 14, 2013, and he joins us tonight. Welcome. Glad you're here.
It's great to be on your program. Thank you.
And you're the first Republican to serve as Attorney General since 1933.
It's been a long time.
And the first one from Jefferson County.
That's right. I know that the Eastern Panhandle was very happy, and I feel very fortunate. A lot of my friends and neighbors were able to put us over the top.
You're from Harpers Ferry.
Yes, right outside of Harpers Ferry. The mailing address of Harpers Ferry, live up on a mountain, a beautiful part of the state. You know, I so wish that everyone has a chance to go visit Harpers Ferry and the historic parts up in the Eastern Panhandle.
Have you moved to Charleston?
Well, yes, we're staying here, of course, under the Constitution. I'm required to spend time down in Charleston during the year, and we're doing that. We literally got into the office 8 o'clock in the morning on January 14th. We started to roll our sleeves up, and we've been working past midnight most nights, because there's a lot of work to do when you inherit an office, place someone who's been in power for 20 years beforehand. There's just a lot to make sure the office gets updated and it's meeting your specifications.
All right. Well, there's so much that I want to know about the Attorney General's office. Can you speak first to our viewers about the situation regarding Mr. Albert Lynn? He's on your staff, but not licensed to practice law in the state. Did you know that when you hired him?
Oh, sure. You know, and this is a great opportunity to talk about an incredible development for the state of West Virginia. We've been talking for so long about how difficult it is to attract the best and the brightest here to West Virginia. So when I was putting together my transition team and looking for top people within the office, we looked at top individuals and lawyers within the state of West Virginia, but we also opened it up nationally. If we could identify one of the top constitutional lawyers, someone with an incredible legal pedigree, we would bring that person in. So after having so many different interviews, we brought a lot of incredibly talented people into the state. In fact, I think almost everyone has been practicing and working in the state of West Virginia. But then we found a gem. We found someone who had clerked for the Supreme Court, who had clerked for U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. He was a trial attorney for the Department of Justice. He was the editor of the Yale Law Journal. He was a partner at a prestigious law firm, had just an incredible pedigree. So we wanted to bring him in. And as the practice that normally occurs in West Virginia, when people come in from another state, it takes a couple months to get licensed. So absolutely, we knew all that, but we feel like we have a first-round draft pick. We just have a great person. And you know what that's going to allow us to do? When you have really good people in place, and sometimes it costs a little bit more money, we can save a lot of money because the state of West Virginia is spending millions of dollars a year on outside counsel fees. If we could beef up the West Virginia Attorney General's office to get top flight lawyers, we're going to be able to save money on some of those outside fees. So with Elbert and a lot of our other people, I think we're well on our way to saving West Virginia taxpayers money.
And he knew he wasn't licensed to practice law in West Virginia when he got the job.
In fact, when we had the announcements, we talked about this. He's been adding a lot of value right now, but he's going through the process the way any lawyer would when you wave into the state. I'm just gratified that he's decided to literally take a job where he's making 1/3 of what he was making before. He's moving his family to Charleston. It's just incredible.
And as Solicitor General, what would he do?
Well, right now he's a senior assistant to the Attorney General. He will be the Solicitor General just within a couple months, assuming everything goes well. But that's going to be the lead person in our office on all appellate matters. So as you know, the state of West Virginia through the Attorney General's office has a lot of appellate functions. In fact, has a lot of different functions related to the law. But we want to make sure that that appellate function is appropriately staffed. You know, whenever you have a lot of the criminal matters or the habeas corpus appeals, and then also any of the federal suits that we have. We want to make sure that we have the best possible legal arguments to protect the state of West Virginia. He's going to be in charge of all the matters that appear before the West Virginia Supreme Court or in our federal courts.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, you have been very busy for just over a little month in office. You have filed a friend of the court brief in the U.S. Supreme Court challenging New York's tough new gun laws.
Right.
Why?
Well, for a lot of different reasons. I think a lot of West Virginians expect that their Attorney General is going to look out for their legal interests because I am the chief legal officer of the state. So we had heard about this case that was pending in the state of New York, where basically the state of New York was requiring individuals to show a particularized need to be able to take weapons outside of their homes. And here in West Virginia, we don't have similar standards. We have more flexibility in terms of our gun laws because I think people really appreciate the Second Amendment here in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's important for West Virginia is that West Virginia enjoys reciprocity arrangements with a lot of states around the nation. And what we're always sensitive to is if a lot of the states start having very, very tight or very narrow views of the Second Amendment, ultimately, that means that West Virginia citizens are going to lack the ability, if we were to ever have a reciprocity agreement with New York or other state, if their laws get too tight, we're going to be in a very difficult position to ensure that our citizens have the ability to go into those states and enjoy the same Second Amendment freedoms that they can in West Virginia.
We don't have that agreement with New York?
No, we don't. We actually don't currently have.
We do with many other states.
We do. I believe we have with 22 to 24 states, and we're always looking to expand that number because I think people appreciate if you enjoy your Second Amendment rights in West Virginia, you should have the ability to enjoy them in other states of the Union as well.
You are also challenging the federal government over the Dodd-Frank Act and bankruptcy laws. Now, in layman's terms, so we can all understand what this is about, why did you become involved in this?
Well, sure. Well, just for our viewers, it's helpful to know that Dodd-Frank, as many people have heard, really revamps the nation's financial system in terms of a lot of the financial institutions that are offering services to the American public. And there are a lot of titles within Dodd-Frank, but one of them dealt with this too big to fail issue that came out in 2008. A lot of the bigger companies that ultimately went bankrupt, and as people may recall from the financial crisis of 2008, there were some real questions in terms of how you would unwind some of the companies. So Congress came in and through Dodd-Frank, they set up these rules governing the bailout provisions, these too big to fail companies. Well, as we started to look at these provisions, we thought that a lot of the banks that operate in the state of West Virginia, a lot of the smaller, the community banks, not the real behemoths, the big financial institutions, they were at a disadvantage under these Dodd-Frank provisions because under this law, the federal government is going to be able to engage in selective bailouts to help out a lot of these bigger entities. And that puts West Virginia banks at a distinct disadvantage. So we thought that it was important for the sake of some of the community banks within West Virginia, but also for the taxpayers' interest to step forward. Because what happens in that law is the federal government has gained unprecedented power to pick winners and losers to decide which creditors are going to get money and which creditors don't under that too big to fail provision. That means that West Virginia taxpayers could be left holding the bag. And I am not going to let the federal government run roughshod over West Virginia in terms of these bailout provisions which could put our state coffers at risk. That just can't happen.
Are there other challenges and briefs that you're considering filing?
Well, we're in the process right now of literally going through a lot of the different types of federal regulations to determine where West Virginia interests lie. So if West Virginia's sovereignty is impaired or threatened, then we're going to step forward and we're going to assert the state's legal interests. But the other thing we want to do is we want to work collaboratively with the governor, with the legislature, and all the agency heads so we could see that West Virginia speaks with one voice. When West Virginia's governor and attorney general and agency heads and legislature all come together, it's best for the state. So right now we're doing research, because I've only been in office about 5 weeks or so, to try to identify where this attorney general's office can step up and protect West Virginia rights. But this is going to take some time. We don't want to rush to judgment. Anytime we file suit for the state of West Virginia, we want to make sure it's for all the right reasons. So we're going to be thorough about this.
And I asked the governor on Monday night, there's no governance structure. You don't have to get permission from the governor or anything like that in order to file these briefs or these challenges.
No, we don't.
You're an elected official just to see his...
That's correct. And in fact, but there are certain circumstances, of course, where you're doing it at the direction of your client. So for example, if the state DEP asks the attorney general for legal help, we are required and of course are happy to represent our client. So those instances occur. And there are other instances where the attorney general's office can act independently. It just depends upon the facts involved. But what we're trying to do is do this in a collaborative way so that everyone knows, and I have a no surprises rule. You know, the governor, the treasurer, the other constitutional officers, no one's going to get surprised because we have to work together as a team. That's why the public elected everyone, and I plan to make sure that happens during my tenure as Attorney General.
Have you met with the governor to discuss your concerns with the Affordable Care Act?
You know, I have. I sat down with the governor, and I have to tell you, the governor has been terrific to work with so far. I really think that we can forge a good working relationship here in the state of West Virginia. Now, it's no secret to a lot of your viewers that my position on the ACA is very clear. I was involved in the lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the ACA when it was pending in one of the circuits, and we actually won that case. That was before it went up to the Supreme Court. I think we have to be very careful about how aggressively we expand Medicaid when we really lack the financial wherewithal to make that happen. But, you know, I also understand that there are cross-competing political pressures that they're thinking about. I just want people to know where we're coming from on this. But at the same time, I have a dual role. One is, as the chief legal officer of the state, to defend the state's positions, but also as an independent elected constitutional officer, I think the public expects to hear my perspective on important issues.
You had your first budget presentation yesterday with the Senate Finance Committee. How'd it go?
I think it went well. I think that the senators were very, very positive, and they appreciated the fact that I went down personally to testify. We really have a lot of transformation that's needed in the Office of Attorney General. The fact is that right now we have systems in place that you wouldn't see in a law firm that existed in the 1980s. We have to move away from a paper system to a much more organized electronic system, because you have to be organized to make sure that you don't miss filing deadlines, which happened in the past, that you're actually going to be very efficient in terms of how you map out attorneys' productivity. We want to move to a newer system because we think that the state of West Virginia could benefit financially from these modernizations.
Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, it's been a pleasure meeting you, and thank you again for coming on.
Thanks so much. I look forward to coming back and being on your show again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2580 to make all future federal, state, and local statutes, ordinances, laws, orders, and rules concerning firearms, accessories, ammunition, and their accoutrements invalid and unenforceable. The bill requires the Attorney General to defend citizens of West Virginia who are prosecuted by the United States government for violation of a federal law relating to the manufacture, sale, transfer, or possession of a firearm, accessory, or ammunition. House Bill 2587 to provide persons who have been hospitalized involuntarily the right to have records expunged when the hospitalization was based upon a wrong diagnosis of condition. House Bill 2588 to require notification to foster parents who previously cared for a child that the child has again been placed in foster care, and to give the foster parents the first opportunity to foster the child if they are qualified and the placement is in the best interest of the child. House Bill 2589 to repeal the section of the state code that allows the sale of paraphernalia for use with controlled substances for a $150 business license. House Bill 2591 to create the Healthy Workplace Act to provide legal relief for employees who have been harmed psychologically, physically, or economically by deliberate exposure to abusive work environments, and legal incentive for employers to prevent and respond to abusive mistreatment of employees at work. And House Bill 2592 to create a Library Facilities Improvement Fund. Up for passage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 2471 to prohibit the restriction of otherwise lawful possession, use, carrying, or display of a firearm or ammunition during a declared state of emergency under the emergency powers of the governor or by any political subdivision of the state during a declared state of emergency. On second reading, the amendment stage, House Bill 2173, to restrict payments for burial services of indigents to only those services provided by a funeral director licensed by West Virginia. And this has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, State Treasurer John Perdue will be joining us. He serves as the state's banker and chief investment officer, processes the state's monies, and pays all the state's bills. We welcome your comments and questions you have about the issues at this legislative session. You can email us at feedback@wvpubcast.org. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following.
The West Virginia High Technology Consortium Foundation, diversifying West Virginia's economy through technological innovation and development at the Fairmont I-79 Technology Park. Now with locations in downtown Wheeling, Moundsville, and Glenville.
Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.